I don't generally make videos like this just giving my thoughts on wrestling events, but it's been quite a while since I was last this hyped, this excited about wrestling. So I wanted to talk for a bit about the recent Wrestle Kingdom 12 event. Of course, this video is going to contain massive spoilers for the whole show, so if you haven't seen it, I can't recommend it enough. Go do it. What are you doing? Stop wasting your life. Go watch New Japan now. Prior to this event, I didn't really have much experience watching New Japan. Last year, I did catch the Okada-Omega match, the main event of Wrestle Kingdom 11, but that was several months after it actually happened. I didn't watch Wrestle Kingdom 11 live. It was just that one match that I caught because everybody was talking about it. Everybody was super hyped about it, and God, that match, if it wasn't a classic, then I don't know what is. But after that, I was pretty interested in checking out New Japan, and shortly after that, I started running into channels like Showbuckle and Real Neat Perot, and they make all these really great videos talking about the history and different aspects of the production of New Japan. And so, through that, I was able to learn more about guys like Okada, guys like Naito, guys like Tanahashi, and through those videos I was able to realize that New Japan has just a style of booking, a style of storytelling that appeals perfectly to me. It's a type of storytelling that WWE has really kind of gotten away from, just this idea of long-term payoffs. And there was one particular line in Real Neat Perot's latest video talking about, he was talking about the Okada and Naito, like the build-up going into the Wrestle Kingdom 12 event, their matchup there. And he talks about how the head booker, or like the head of New Japan Pro Wrestling, how he isn't willing to like back down from his long-term plans. Like maybe he has to take things in a different direction than he might have initially planned, but ultimately he'll still stick with it. And I think that's really cool because I don't know, I just like long-term payoffs. I like long-term storytelling. That's why when I watch my anime, I'll watch the longer running shows, or like manga, just stories. I like longer running stories because I think there's more storytelling capabilities with that. And the same applies to wrestling. One of my favorite rivalries that I didn't experience live, but I like to look back on fondly, is the feud between Shawn Michaels and Triple H. This big epic that spans over the course of 2 or 3 years after Michaels returned in 2002 and up until like 2004 when they had their big, was it a 3 Stages of Hell match or was it Hell in the Cell? Either way, it was a huge rivalry. You've got the falling out of D-Generation X, Evolution gets brought in, you build up new stars there. It's just great. And I consider this type of stuff when I make my Universe Mode videos. Whenever, like when you have an event that is ultimately in service of a bigger storyline, but perhaps people aren't very satisfied with the outcome, it could be tempting to change plans, to kind of shy away from that. But ultimately, I really am fascinated by like the pursuit of a creative vision. Like, they clearly had an idea, they had a story going with with Okada and Naito, and they might have had to work around it a bit, but they ultimately got back to this big match here at Wrestle Kingdom 12. And it clearly shows that that type of long-term storytelling, when you have that big build-up, you're going to get a tremendous payoff out of it. And so even if the match itself isn't like a technical masterpiece, it still is going to deliver in a big way from a storytelling standpoint. And I think that was pretty clear just in the outcome of the Okada-Naito match, which was pretty surprising. I was going into this matchup fully expecting Naito to pick up the win, and that's not what happened. Okada actually managed to retain, which is just crazy, because when I look at Kazuchika Okada, and after going through all these videos, learning more about his story, how he has grown to overcome New Japan's previous ace, Hiroshi Tanahashi, and just the way he got here, this sort of corporate champion persona he had, I see, to a degree, I see parallels to Roman Reigns, and the same could be said to Tetsuya Naito, more so with like his Stardust Genius moniker, how these two guys were seemingly handpicked from like the minute this guy took over. It seemed like these two were his handpicked stars, the front runners that were going to carry the company forward. And unlike with Roman Reigns, where the company received a ton of backlash for that, Roman Reigns received a ton of backlash, and certain fans still really haven't gotten over that. They might never get over it. But with Okada and Naito, these two guys are beloved in New Japan, and I don't know if that's just a difference in fan mentality or the difference in the way they were booked. I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of different facets that ultimately play into what reaction these two guys get. But you look at a guy like Okada who, I mean, you want to talk about strapping a rocket to a guy's ass and pushing him to the moon. I mean, Okada, he is the longest reigning IWGP Heavyweight Champion in history, and he's only 30 years old. This man he's got, what, 4 title reigns since his debut in 2012, I think was when he first showed up. And he's already surpassed Hiroshi Tanahashi for the longest consecutive days as champion. He's getting pretty close. He's got about 6, I think he needs 7 more title defenses to surpass Tanahashi for the most title defenses in history. But this is usually an effort that is like a career-spanning journey, that usually it'll take a guy their entire career to amount a legacy like this, to, rack up these accolades. But here is Kazuchika Okada, and he still has, I mean, he's got years ahead of him, and yet he's already like one of the biggest names in the history of Japan. Japanese wrestling, rather. I mean, this man is, like, he's an icon. And even when he goes up against the fan favorite Tetsuya Naito in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom 12, everything is pointing to the fact that this will be Naito's night, this will be his moment. Even when Okada defeats him, he still gets cheered. And I just think that's crazy, because if you put like Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan in a WWE ring, which they did before, when Reigns beats Bryan, he got some support, but people were still very upset about that. And I just think it's crazy that New Japan can sort of recreate that atmosphere. Of course, I think it's on a much grander scale for them. But you have the fan favorite Naito come into this match and ultimately lose on what feels like it should be his night. Like, the crowd was pretty split, but it seemed pretty evident that they were in favor of Naito, but yet he still lost. The matchup itself was pretty stellar. I think I might have been a tad disappointed with it, just because, like, going into this, I had this match as, like, this was going to be one of the best matches I'd ever seen. I think I had set my expectations a little too high, and it was still a really great match, but I think I put it up on a pedestal that wasn't really fair. But it didn't really fall super short of my expectations. It was still a really good match. There were some great spots, great camera work. There was one shot in particular, which I'll put on screen, where during Okada's entrance, you have Okada doing his pose in the background, and he's kind of overshadowed by Naito, which I think is great imagery to kind of get across Okada's perspective in this match, because even though Okada he has all these accolades, he still hasn't really been able to escape the shadow of Tetsuya Naito. Naito has always sort of just been, I don't know, Real Neej Perot explained it better in his video, which, again, I highly recommend you check that out. But I just think that was a really great image. I mean, New Japan's camera work is generally pretty great, but I just love all the little details that play into the atmosphere of this match. You have towards the tail end of it, where Okada keeps the grip on the wrist, much like he did with Hiroshi Tanahashi at Wrestle Kingdom 10, I believe it was, when he finally surpassed Tanahashi. And then he finishes Naito off with the Rainmaker. It was great. And then there's the fact that Okada was wearing tights in this matchup instead of trunks, which to me kind of came off as like, I don't know, maybe he was trying to overcompensate for something, like, or maybe this was like the dawn of a new era for him. Because prior to this match, I think the commentators pointed out that was the first time he had ever worn tights. Typically he wore his trunks to the ring. But much like he had to do with Hiroshi Tanahashi, this was a matchup where Okada had to overcome Naito, had to finally put that phantom behind him, get Naito out of his sight so he could progress forward as the true #1 ace of New Japan. And I don't know if the debut of the new look was perhaps a way to just show that, I mean, there were just a lot of little details throughout this match that showed that Naito was clearly in Okada's head. I mean, you have the fact that he develops a submission counter specifically for the Destino, that Cobra Clutch. It was just a great match, a great main event to the show. Then, of course, you have the matchup that I'm sure most, like, new viewers of New Japan were really looking forward to, the Kenny Omega versus Chris Jericho match. And I gotta say, while I didn't like this match as much as Okada versus Naito, at least, like, with Okada Naito, that was more so there's this big, grand narrative going into this matchup, and so it was kind of inherently heightened because of that. Omega versus Jericho certainly carried with it a very intense atmosphere. It might not have had the 6-year build that Okada versus Naito had, but Omega versus Jericho, it really captured that fight, that real fight feel. You know, as far as like a pro wrestling fight can be. Jericho is just an incredible heel. You have him before the match when Omega is kind of parting ways with the Young Bucks. Jericho assaults him from behind, and you've got these two just chomping at the bit. They're ready to fight before the bell is even rung, and you have guys, I think the Young Lions, like restraining Jericho. It really did, again, play into that aspect that these two were out there to basically kill each other. They couldn't even wait for the bell to ring. And Jericho, he really is a tremendous heel. What with him, I mean, attacking Omega before the match, attacking Red Shoes, the referee, attacking his son outside the ring. And, I mean, Jericho just did so much in this match to really garner sympathy for Kenny Omega. Because I think, for the most part, Kenny Omega was a heel leading up to this. But I don't know if he's, like coming out of this, he might still be a heel. But on the night, Omega certainly was gaining a lot of sympathy. I mean, the fact that, he's busted open, Jericho's just maliciously assaulting him, ramming his skull into a steel chair, attempting to put him through a table. That powerbomb on the outside was pretty wicked. This match certainly wasn't one of Kenny Omega's 40 or 50-minute classics, but with the way that everything played out, the slow pacing of the match, it really felt like it went on forever, and I think that was to the match's benefit. It felt like a slow, agonizing, just these two men throwing everything they could at each other. It felt exhausting. It was exhausting to watch, and I think that was part of why the match was so incredible. And Chris Jericho, man, 47 years old, he's been doing this for 20 years, and the man can still go. I mean, that counter to the one-winged angel straight into the walls of Jericho was beautiful. I thought for sure that Omega had dropped him with... I thought he was going to drop him with a one-winged angel, and that was the finish. That was the end of the match. But he rolled straight through into a walls of Jericho. It was crazy. And then you have some cool callbacks, like when he put his boot on Omega's chest and did that pose that I guess he debuted in Japan all those years ago. Some good callbacks there. I guess I did have one little nitpick with this match where Omega hit him with a one-winged angel, but Jericho was able to reach out and grab the ropes for before the 3 count. Not because it was a rope break, but just because, like, up to this point in the matches I've seen from Kenny Omega, his one-winged angel had been severely protected. Like, the match with Okada at Wrestle Kingdom 11, Omega never even pulled out the one-winged angel. It was countered every time. He was never able to hit it. And that's, again, part of the reason why that match was so great. And then, you know, just the other matches I had seen, I saw his match with Okada at in the G1 Climax. I saw his match with Naito in the G1 Climax, and in both of those matches, the one-winged angel was not. I don't think the one-winged angel was kicked out of. I don't think he even used it in the match with Naito. He had so many other moves he was able to pull out. But I guess that's just a bit of a, I don't know, part of it being that Chris Jericho, with his age, the fact that, I mean, this is not the Chris Jericho of 10, 20 years ago, so I'd imagine that there are certain moves that Omega is not going to use against Jericho. There are just certain moves that he's not going to pull out because, I don't know, it might be at a risk to Jericho's health or something. I am still pretty surprised that he went for that, the double underhook pile driver. That was crazy. But yeah, this was another really solid match. I still would say that Okada versus Naito was probably my favorite on the night, but that's mainly, you know, in part due to the massive story going into it, and that was the match I was hyped for, was Okada-Naito. But Omega versus Jericho did not disappoint. I know this is what most people were looking forward to. I think as far as, like, new fans were concerned, I know this match was a big billing point for the show, for an international audience. And it certainly did deliver. It did feel like a semi-main event, or if you want to call it a co-main event. It really did have that big fight feel. God, I want Omega to win that IWGP title. I don't want him to leave New Japan. I want him to stay there, to retire there. Because I just, like, now that this is popping up and I'm getting super excited about New Japan, and I just see WWE's product just slowly losing me, I'm just like, no, everybody go to New Japan. But you can't really do that, because then that would water down New Japan and kind of take away why it's so great if everybody just went there. But I don't know. I see a guy like Nakamura going over to WWE, and I'm like, but they're not using you properly. You could do so much better. Fortunately for me, I have a ton of backlog to catch up on. There are a lot of, like, Tanahashi matches I want to catch up on, because his match with Jay White I wasn't super impressed by it. I mean, it's still Tanahashi, so it was still, there was some good ring psychology in there, some good moments on the part of Tanahashi, but ultimately I can tell that this man is, I mean, the commentary sold it as well, that Tanahashi is sort of on his way out. I mean, the man is in his 40s. He's been the ace of the company for, I think, over a decade now. So it makes sense that Tanahashi's on his way out. I wouldn't expect him to have, you know, the best performance of his career. He's got nagging injuries sort of catching up to him. But man, there are a lot of matches that I want to see from Tanahashi in his prime, because I feel like, I mean, this man, he does certainly feel like an ace. You can tell that this man was a big megastar. It was more so that I didn't really know Jay White's story. I didn't really know who he was. So I think on that end, I wasn't as impressed with him. I mean, he didn't have a bad performance, but with this matchup, I definitely think it benefited from not being the semi-main event, which was interesting that when commentary pointed out that this was, I think, the first Hiroshi Tanahashi Wrestle Kingdom match. Was it the first match ever, or the first in so many years that Tanahashi hadn't been in either the main event or the semi-main event? So that was pretty cool. I'm glad that's what I like about this commentary, is that, you know, I could watch the Japanese commentary or I could watch the English commentary. It doesn't, I don't have a preference between the two, but at least with, like, the English commentary, they will point out certain details that I didn't know before. Just certain details to really accentuate the story, really bring out the small details and the long-term storytelling ability that New Japan has. So I will say that the commentary was pretty good. I do like how the commentators will mostly focus on the action. You did have cool little moments, or I guess more personal moments, like in the match between Ibushi and Cody, where Cody was like handing off the ring or whatever, and the commentators were kind of playing off of that, which I think made more sense, as like Cody is an American superstar, so, you know, to have that interaction with the more like the Western commentary team, I think it made sense. But it's not like in WWE where you have the commentators off joking around and, you know, having arguments amongst each other. It's less about having like a heel and a face commentator to try to flesh them out as their own unique personas, but just have them there as spectators to the event, allow them to bring out the high qualities of the match, bring out, you know, talk about the storytelling, the background, talk about everything going into this match to make it feel as epic as possible, and this commentary team does a great job at doing that. I did catch the Fatal 4-Way match that Will Ospreay won. That was for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, but I mean, it was alright. It wasn't what I was going to New Japan for, because like most of the matches I've seen so far are these big, you know, the big singles matches, the more drawn out epics. There's less of the super high spots. Like Okada versus Omega had some pretty killer spots, but looking at this matchup, there's a lot of flying around, a lot of superstars. Like you had sunset flip power bombs, you had springboard cutters, you had all sorts of different high spots in this matchup. A lot of, I mean, it's for the junior heavyweight title, so I guess that's to be expected. But it didn't particularly appeal to me. This seemed more like something I could see out of like WWE's cruiserweight division or whatnot. Which doesn't mean that it was a bad thing. It probably had a really good place on the card to get the crowd hyped for later matches, but it just didn't appeal to me particularly. And I did skip most of these other matches just because I only had so much time. I wasn't able to catch this live because I had to work in the morning, so I think I figured out that it was right around when the Tanahashi match would have been starting that I would have had to leave for work, so I would have missed all the matches I was excited for anyway. But yeah, I did sort of skip around. I will probably go back and watch some of these matches later. I know people were hyping up the Goto Suzuki match, so that sounds interesting. Then there's also the tag team title match with Los Ingobernables, so I might go and check that one out as well. I mean, there's the Young Bucks match. I don't know, maybe I'll watch it, maybe I won't, but the other match that I did watch was Kota Ibushi versus Cody. And this matchup, it wasn't anything spectacular like you'd expect out of Omega Jericho or Okada Naito, but the fucking crossroads from the apron to the floor, and just the way that Ibushi sells, it doesn't surprise me that he's broken his neck in the past. Like, I watched some of his matches in the G1 Climax, specifically his match with Tetsuya Naito. And the way that he sold those Destinos, I'm amazed he didn't break his neck. Like, this man, Kota Ibushi, God, he's insane. I would love to see Ibushi challenge for... I would love to see an Ibushi-Okada match, or maybe an Ibushi-Naito... Well, I already saw an Ibushi-Naito match. I haven't seen Ibushi-Okada, though. Not to say it's not out there, maybe it is out there, but that'd be super exciting. This is one guy that I want to learn more about. Like, I'd love to see Showbuckle or Real Neat Pro make a video on Ibushi's story. Or maybe I can just go back and watch all of Ibushi's matches in New Japan and figure out the story from there. But I really like the personality this guy has, where on commentary they're always talking about where is Ibushi's head at. Like, if he's in the game, if he's in the zone, he's one of the top stars in New Japan, but he's not always there, and so his matches aren't always... Like, he could be the potential ace of New Japan if his head was in the game, but it isn't always there. And I can definitely see that with how, like, both in, I guess, his matches, but also the fact that Ibushi left New Japan for a bit. He was in the Cruiserweight Classic, he was doing other stuff on the indies, just, maybe not on the indies is the right term, but, you know, going around to other promotions and having matches there. But with New Japan, I feel like Kota Ibushi definitely is a big star, but I also felt as though he was like a small fish in a bigger pond. Because, like, when I think of the Cruiserweight Classic, Ibushi was basically the crown jewel of that tournament. He was like the big focal point. It was that Ibushi is the big guy. He's surely going to be a favorite to win this thing. But it seems as though my thought that Ibushi was a small fish in a bigger pond might not necessarily be all that accurate, because, I mean, Ibushi has had classic matches back in the day. I know his match at Wrestle Kingdom 9 with Shinsuke Nakamura was pretty epic. Just the way that Nakamura's strong style was able to bring out this sort of, like, I don't know, bring out that aggression in Ibushi. It was just a really good match. It was another one that I was glad I could check out. But clearly there's more I need to see from Ibushi. I heard that he had an Intercontinental title match with Hiroshi Tanahashi a few months back, so I'm gonna go back and check that one out. There's just a lot. There's just several different superstars who I'm really excited to go back and check out their catalog of matches. I know another guy who's not on this card, but Katsuyori Shibata, that's another one who I want to go back and watch his matches, although I don't know how much I'll enjoy them. They're not for the faint of heart. Some of the way that he just... The brute force, the physicality Shibata brings to his matches. But honestly, like, I could go back and watch basically everything in Okada's title reign and then find new superstars to watch from there, like Shibata or any of his other opponents that he's faced. But the match with Cody was pretty solid, and the commentators were talking about how in a previous year there was a singles matchup like this where it seemed like the winner could go on to basically become a #1 contender to go on to later compete for the IWGP Heavyweight title. And so maybe that's where Kota Ibushi is headed. Although I would like to see Omega potentially challenge for the title again. Maybe not necessarily too soon, but I'd love to see Omega win the IWGP Heavyweight title. And the same with Ibushi. I'd love to see an Ibushi-Okada match. So I don't know what this team is going to do next, what's going to be next for Okada, because I'm still surprised that Okada actually defeated Naito, but that's another instance of, like, going into it, you would expect it to be that Naito would get the win, and that's one of those instances where predictability is not a bad thing, because, I mean, the people are behind Naito, everyone is super excited to see this guy have his big moment on the big stage in the Tokyo Dome to win in the main event, capture the IWGP Heavyweight title, and cement himself as, you know, the top star, Japan's Shuyaku. In a way, it's kind of like what happened with Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30, where he beats Triple H, he beats Randy Orton and Batista, and he becomes the WWE champion. He becomes the big star in the main event. It's something that the people wanted to see, and it would have made sense from a storytelling perspective, from as far as the storyline was concerned, because Naito, he's gone through this huge journey to redeem himself after having the main event stolen from him 3 or 4 years ago. 4 years ago. He slowly, one by one, overcame the things that set him back in the first place. He overcomes Tanahashi. He overcomes the Intercontinental Championship, the title that cost him the main event at the previous Wrestle Kingdom. He wins the IWGP Heavyweight title back in 2016 before dropping it to Okada again. So really, he had already fulfilled the main story beats to achieve his redemption, and he's got the support of the crowd behind him. But this would have been the ultimate crowning moment where everything comes together and Naito truly becomes the Shuyaku. But he fails, and that's what makes it interesting, because going into it, while it would be predictable, you would expect Naito to get the win because it makes so much sense from the stance of the storyline. But then Okada defeats him, and there's still a lot going for Okada as well, because even though he has surpassed Tanahashi as far as like the longest reigning champion of all time goes, he still hasn't really, like with New Japan, Okada is like a symbolic representation of their status as a company. Like with Okada trying to overcome the previous ace Tanahashi, New Japan is trying to overcome its previous days in this golden age. They're trying to become a bigger promotion. So while yes, Okada has overcome Tanahashi's record in that regard, there's still many things that he has to do to truly surpass Tanahashi, to truly surpass the greats. So I'm very interested to see where this company goes. I'm very interested to see what happens with Kazuchika Okada, because I love long-term storytelling, but I also just love seeing a champion hold a title for so long. And especially looking at Okada, the way that even before dropping the title to Naito back in 2016, he had another 300+ day reign there. So Okada has been absolutely dominating New Japan since 2015, and it looks like it's just only going to continue. And that's so much more interesting to me than seeing a guy win the WWE, seeing John Cena win the WWE title 16 times in his career, when most of those title reigns, they were just kind of back and forth, like he'd pick it up and then drop it. Even the way that he defeated AJ Styles for the title at, was it the Royal Rumble? Like he beat Styles and then dropped it to Bray Wyatt in the Elimination Chamber almost immediately. It was an incredibly lackluster title reign that, like, you get the moment where he ties Flair's record, but that seemed like that was all it was for. It was just for the moment. It was just to have him match that record, and that was all it was. There was no big story significance out of it or whatever. But with Okada, it's all part of his arc. It's all part of his character arc. He's striving to overcome the legacy of Hiroshi Tanahashi. He's striving to become the biggest name in New Japan history. And through his continued title reign, he will continue to do that. So while yes, the title reign is impressive from a statistical standpoint, it's also impressive from the perspective of character growth, character development, character progression, all that good stuff. And those are my thoughts on Wrestle Kingdom 12. Thank you for joining me for this one, and hopefully in the future, I did talk about in my last, well, not my last video, but one of the previous videos, that I might start doing video essays on wrestling content. Obviously, it wouldn't be unscripted like this. This was just a rambling video where I just kind of wanted to capture my thoughts. But in the future, maybe I'll do more video essays on wrestling content. Maybe I'll do some on New Japan, because from what I understand, they won't, like, copyright spam you for using their content under fair use, unlike WWE, which will pull everything down if you use footage or whatever. So there might be more potential there. I still have a lot of learning to do with that, though. Like, I have to learn more about New Japan, so it'd be quite some time until I could actually do that. But yeah, thank you for joining me for this video. I hope you enjoyed Wrestle Kingdom 12. If you didn't even watch it, then you just spoiled everything, you fool. But until my next video, keep on YouTubing.